Hello everyone, welcome to today's class, which will be held online as the next Monday I unfortunately have an exam, so I cannot have a in-person class with you. So we will do a little recap of everything that we have learned so far in the course actually. Uh, it will be very brief and I will mostly highlight the stuff that we need for this game, which we picked. So the last lesson we have picked the game TicTacToe to code it, and we have already done quite a good job at it. I think all of you actually have implemented the first part of it. So today we'll try to finish it, and I'll try to give you hints for what you're going to need. So first of all, let's see how the game is played and how we will want to play the game. I'm sure you all know tic-tac-toe from real life, but having it inside of a computer is a different thing. So I have this kind of game in mind. The program has to print out the board, so we will just use a 3x3, and then it will ask the first player, we can call the first player X, which row they want to put their symbol into. So let's say the first row. In Python we go from 0, so we put 0. Then we need to specify the column. So let's say 0, and you can see that in this way we will put the symbol in here. Then the next player comes on, and that's the player O. So let's say 1 and 1, which is the middle square. And like this, the game should go on. Now, if the player X tries to put the symbol at the same spot the player O has already put it, the game should notice that and say the spot is already taken, and it should keep asking the player X. Also, if we put some place that is not actually in the playground, so 4 is outside of it, that would be like somewhere here, but we must notice that it's wrong, and we must call it out, and we must make the player play again. So these are the two checks that should happen. Now let's try to win the game. So let's try to win it with the player X. So he will put it in 1-0, which is over here. Then let's say we put in 2-2 with player O, and now we need to put the symbol X into the last row and the first column, so we can see that the player X wins. Okay. So that's how the game should work. The most important thing that we did the last time is deciding how we will represent this board. Right, it's a 3x3 board, so it's not very clear how we could represent that. It's a hard task for us. So for that, let me go back to the recap, what we have done before. So let's recap what we have learned. I've actually done some coding here before, so because I was recording before and I realized my screen was not recording properly, so I'll actually just create a new console. Okay, so that is the basic data types. I think we don't need to go over them really like in detail because you all are familiar with them. So this first one, the age, is an integer. The second one is a float. It's just numbers, but this one has a decimal point. Okay, then we also can have strings. So string is just some text. Be careful, because we could also create a string which is actually in and of its own a number. Right, so this is a number, but as a data type it's a string because it has these quotes around here. So for that we need to be careful. There is this function which can create actual integer out of this number. Conversely, we can also make a string out of a number. So if I do something like this, that becomes a string. So these are two functions which create, which can change the data types. Then we also saw some operators, so some mathematical operators. Then we have, of course, division, multiplication, everything. One of them that we did is this modulus operator, which was quite interesting, which we could, for example, use to check if a number is even. So if I do this, so 4 modulus 2, and it gives me 0, then the number is even. So you can see that if I put a 5, it gives me 1. So that is the remainder after division. So if I divide 6 by 2, it's 3 and there's nothing remaining. So now the next data type is not as simple as these that we have just seen, and it's called a list. So I can create my class variable and I will create this list. It's denoted by these brackets, and I can put elements into it which are divided by comma. So this would be the first class member, it could be the second one, and so forth. So now I created my class variable, which is of type list. It's very important to be able to work with this list, as it's a very common data type that we need to be able to interact with. So the first one is asking what element sits in a given position. So here we can see that in the first position the name is Adam. So the way we access it is also with brackets, and we put the position careful. In Python we always go from 0. So this gives us the first person. If I put 1 here, it gives the second person. There is also some methods that we can use with it. The classic one, which we probably need, is append, which puts an element to the end of the list. So here in this example, if we wanted to add another classmate, we would use the append method. So the way we do it is we call the append method on a list. So it is a list method. Something which is a function is, for example, the len function. You will remember that it gives me the length of the list, which here is the number of classmates, or the pupils, let's say. Then something we will also need in the TicTacToe game, maybe not need, but it is always nice to have it for code efficiency and the way it looks, the cleanliness, is a function. So function we use if we want to use some code repeatedly. We don't want to copy the code. So this is the way we create a function. So we use the def keyword, def as in definition. Then we put the name of the function. So let's write a function which checks if a number is even. Then we put parentheses, and then goes the arguments. Here we just want the number to check if it's even or not. A function can return something, and very often does. So we do that by using the return keyword. And then we check if the number is even. So as I said before, we can check it by using the modulus. So now we have just defined the function, and the way we use it is this. So I could create a variable is 3 an even number, which will just hold the information if 3 is an even number, which we know it's not. But let's do it programmatically. So I call the function, I put 3 as an argument, and then I can see my variable got created here. That's also a difference between returning something in a function or not returning. So if I don't return anything, let's say I just print it, right, instead of returning. Then when I call the function, everything seems normal. is even 3, yes, it's false. But now if I try to assign it to a variable, I go x equals is even 3, then I can see none is returned. That's because the function doesn't return anything, so it just returns none, which is a special type. Okay, let me check if I am missing something. So we did the indexation, which is just accessing some elements from the list. Okay, we will need to go through the loops, which we will also need for the assignment, for the TicTacToe. But maybe first, let's just remind us how we wanted to represent the board. And I will just actually start coding here for the game. So the board in TicTacToe can be represented as a list of lists. This is a big step for you, this is a completely new thing, but we can actually, as we had elements in here, and those elements were individual strings, we can have a list. So this is a list where each element is a list. Why we do it? Because each of the lists is an individual row of the board, and I will use blank as the symbol to show that there's nothing inside of the row. I will just copy it, and this is the board that we will use. Some of you have tried to code the game in your own way, which is perfectly fine. You can continue doing this, but we will do this together. This will be our official version. And you can also see that this version is nicer to work with, because some of you that did the different solution, you ran into problems, but here you will not run into the same problems. Let me just show you where the board is. Okay, so when we were playing the game here, you can clearly see the board. The row has 3 elements, and there is 3 rows. Okay, so we will represent the board as a list of lists. Now let's say we need to change something in the board, which we all for sure will need, because the player wants to put their symbols in the board. So the way we do it is by using these indexes, as we have shown here with the class. Is completely the same thing. Okay, so let's first change a classmate in here. Let's say some of the classmate has left, maybe the last one. So that would be the index 3, Martin, has left the class, and the new student has come in, which would be named Michael. So the way we do it is like this. We say in the list my class, on the 3rd position, assign a new element. So it's just assigning to a variable. So now that I executed this, you can clearly see that the last classmate has changed. It will be completely the same with the board. We will just need to use 2 indexes. So I will put these 2 brackets here. Let's change it to X, and we will maybe change the middle tile. So now if I run the code, nothing happens because we haven't printed anything. So let's print the board here. I print the board before changing it, and then after changing it as well, so you can clearly see. Right, here's the X. Most of you have done this in class in some way. Okay, now let's go back to the recap, and we just need to recap 2 things, which is loops. So for and while. Gabriela introduced this to you nicely, and as she said, you use for loop in one specific condition and use while in a different condition, in a different situation. So for is for certain types of situations and while is for different types of situations. So let's say we want to print out every student of the class one by one. So we can do this with a for loop. So I would go for classmate in my class, print classmate. So we can see they get printed one by one. So this we use for loop when we know how many elements we want to do the operation for. And those elements are usually stored in something that resembles a list. It can be a list, it can be many other things, but the main part is it's some elements in a package in one place, and you go through them one by one. So here we created this variable. By the way, this is just a variable. I can name this x and it will work just the same, but it is always nicer to name the variable descriptively, which means describe what the variable actually holds. Here, by the way, you can do many things. That also holds for the while loop, which we'll do later. Here could be many other things, right? So if you need to do multiple things, it doesn't matter as long as there is a tab in here. Everything that's tabbed will be under the for loop. So the purpose of the for loop is to give you access to the elements of the list one by one. We do it by creating this classmate variable. So now I would just print each classmate 3 times, which I don't really want to do, but let's just show it. A while loop, on the other hand, is when we don't know until when we will be doing some operation. I will not give you an example of a while loop, but I will just say that, okay, actually I need to give you an example just how to write it down. So we would create a variable I, and we put I inside of the condition of the while loop. So until I is smaller than 10, we want to print out the I, but this wouldn't ever finish. We need to also increase the I in each iteration by 1. Each time the loop runs, we need to increase I by 1. So I starts at 0, we print it, and then we increase it. And this will keep happening until, while I is smaller than 10. So this will actually print out numbers from 0 to 9. Why this will be important for the game? We don't know how long the game will take. That's why we cannot use for loop. We need to do something of this sort. While the game is running, play the game. So this is not Python code, these 2 lines. The while loop, yes, but this is not Python code. It's just me telling you what in principle you will need to do in your game. So we will need to come up with a condition which tells us if the game is still running. Maybe the better game is while game not finished, something like that. Okay, that would conclude the recap. Now I will code for you, maybe in a different way than you have done it, but what most of you have done the last time. So let's code something from the TicTacToe. I have already shown you what you will need in particular is the while loop and accessing the board and maybe creating a function. So let's get this out of the list. So let's code what we have done the last time. So as for now, if I run it, we have done 1 player and they played in a given position by us, which is the middle position. What we would actually like to do is to give the player the option to specify where they want to play. So first of all, let's say the first player will be X. We've already done this before, but let's just put it to variables. So I create a simple variable by which we will rewrite what's inside the board. But these positions, we want them differently. So let's actually ask the user where they want to play. For this, as you know, we can use the input function. So we say, please give us a row. I'll put this inside of a variable. And then we do the same thing for a column. Please give us a column. Okay, now we replace these ones by where the user wants to play. So here I put a row and here I put a column. Why? Because we said these are the rows and these are the columns. I mean, I cannot really show you the column with highlighting, but this is the column. Maybe just so we perfectly understand this line, let me just go back to the console and let's imagine that we don't have a class anymore, but we have a school, whole school. The school can have multiple classes, so these empty lists would be the classes, and each class has some number of students. I'll just put 2. You can notice that this is actually the same thing as the board. It is a list of lists. Now let's imagine we wanted to change this student. Maybe he left and he goes somewhere else. So how would we do it? We put school. We select the first class, which would be the same as selecting the first row in the board, which we do by 0. And then we select the second student. And then we need to replace it with assignment, so we can put some other student. And you can see now that I executed it, that inside of the school, the student is changed. That's exactly, this line is exactly what we need to do with the symbol. We need to replace the blank in the positions given by the user by the symbol. So now if I run it, I have to be careful this wouldn't work. I'll just show you. If I put 0, 0, it doesn't work. As what this input function returns is a string. So what I actually try to do now is not this, but this. And I have to be very careful with the data types. So we will actually need to change this from a string to integer, which we can do by using this int function. Okay, now it will work, and we have successfully coded one turn of one player. Now we can just create the turn of the second player by copying this code. But you already know that this is not very nice to do. I will do it anyway just to show you, but your task will be to think of a way not to do this copying. So here we obviously need to change the symbol because the other player is the 0 or the O. And let's just check it works. So if I put 0, 0 with the player 1, then it goes here. And then the O goes here. So now we have one turn for each player. But we will need to make sure that the game runs and that it also checks that the players are not overwriting each other, because what could happen now is if I put 0, 0 here and 0, 0 here, then they just, okay, X goes here first, but then the player just rewrites what the other player has done. So that you will need to check. Okay, but other than that, this code is pretty much ready for you to finish the game. So I'll give you a few hints what we need to do, and I'll also give you one function which will make this ugly print nicer. So let's maybe start with the function. I will call it custom print, which gets the board, and we will use the for loop to go row by row. So we go row in board and we print the row. So this function was very popular in the last class because we didn't like how it looked. So let's just replace all of this normal print with our custom print, and let's see what it will do. Now it prints row by row, which is the way we want to see it as humans. Okay, and as the last thing, now the game finishes, and I put something here, the game just finishes after one turn of each player, which is not what we want. So we will need to make sure to put this inside of a while loop, which for now I'll just do this, which means the while loop runs forever. I will put this inside of the while loop by using tab. And what you need to do is to come up with the condition until when should the game run. So that's what we did before. So while game running, I will just make sure the game running so far for now is true, so it runs forever, as I said, but you need to change this. Okay, so you need to change this, which means basically figure out how to check if game is over. So now if I run the code, okay, I'm running a different kind of code. Oh, it imported some stuff. Okay, I was not running the code I wanted to. So now if I run our code, I can play the game. Maybe let's get rid of the first print. I'll just have the print after the player plays something inside of the board. So let's play the game now. Let's maybe win with one of these players. So I will try to win with player X. You can see that the player X has already won the game as per the rules. There is 3 in a row. But the game doesn't recognize it. It's because of this. You need to fix this. Also, what could happen, I could just rewrite what the player has done. So if I put 0, 0, you can see that the X has changed to O, which we also don't want to happen. And also what can happen is if I put crazy coordinates here, then the game crashes, which we don't want to. We need to make sure the player gives only something specified. I mean, only something that's inside of the board, which is basically numbers from 0 to 2. Okay, so I leave this whole code for you here to copy. And good luck to you. So your task is to finish the game so it works as like the game that we have seen at the beginning. And now I have shown you the problems with our game. So good luck to you, and we'll for sure go over it the next class. Goodbye.